Welcome to Time Before Us, the channel where ancient history breathes again. Before time had a name, before the first human breath, there existed a world fierce, forgotten, and alive. Creatures of scale and silence, predators wrapped in, feathers, titans that shook the earth, lives erased, bones buried beneath eternity. But they are not lost, they are waiting. This is Time Before Us, where prehistoric worlds rise again, and the stories buried in stone finally speak. Chapter 1. The World Before Borders. Imagine, just for a moment, that you could stand on the Earth 200 million years ago. Forget the world map, Forget countries, oceans, even the outlines of continents. Back then, Earth was one vast continuous landmass, so immense, so complete, that it stretched almost from pole to pole. A world without borders. A world without separation. This was Pangea. At first glance, it would have felt like an alien planet. The air heavy and warm. The horizon so far and endless, you could travel for weeks without ever reaching an ocean. No ships, no coastlines to define the edges of civilizations. Instead, an unbroken expanse of land, stretching further than the human eye or imagination could grasp. But what would you have seen? What would life have looked like in this world before borders? The heart of Pangea was a desert so enormous it makes today's Sahara look modest by comparison. Imagine sand stretching for thousands upon thousands of miles, dunes rising like mountains, and not a single drop of rain for months, maybe even years. Animals venturing into this barren heartland had little chance of survival. It was a dead zone at the very center of life's grand stage. And yet, along the edges of this great desert, life flourished. Dense forests stretched across river valleys, lush green canopies swayed in prehistoric winds, and strange ferns towered high into the sky. This was not the greenery we know today. No flowers, no grass carpets, but a primeval jungle of ancient plants, cycads, horsetails, giant club mosses. A forest alive with sounds you'd barely recognize. Picture this: a group of early dinosaurs, small, nimble, bird-like creatures darting between the trees, their sharp eyes catching the shimmer of insects in the air. Nearby, crocodile-like reptiles bask on the riverbanks, mouths half open to release the heat. In the distance, mammal-like reptiles scuttle through undergrowth, strange half-creatures that hint at the mammals we would one day become. But what strikes you most is not the animals. It's the sheer sense of scale. Imagine walking for days without encountering a mountain range to block your path. No natural barriers. No oceans cutting off one land from another. On Pangea, creatures roamed freely. A reptile that evolved in what would one day be Africa could easily walk into what we now call North America. A predator born in what would become Asia could chase prey into the land that would someday be South America. Life moved without boundaries. Evolution played out across the grandest stage in Earth's history. Yet, beneath your feet, the story was far more dramatic than what the eye could see. The Earth itself was restless. The crust, though appearing solid, was a giant puzzle of plates drifting slowly on molten rock. It was this hidden engine, the churning mantle beneath, that had first pushed the continents together, welding them into Pangea. And it was this same force that one day would tear them apart. But in this chapter of the story, we're not yet at the fracture. We're at the height of unity. The Earth is think of the animals that lived here. Picture massive amphibians lurking in swamps, their bulging eyes breaking the surface as they watch for prey. Imagine early dinosaurs just beginning to emerge, not yet the titans of the later Jurassic and Cretaceous, but scrappy survivors finding their place in this unforgiving world. Some were predators, quick and agile, built for speed. Others were plant eaters, their teeth perfectly designed to strip the strange vegetation that dominated the land. But even for them, survival was no guarantee. Because life on Pangea was both opportunity and danger. With so much connected land, predators had a wide range to hunt. Ecosystems weren't small, local pockets like today, they were global highways. A predator could evolve in one corner of the supercontinent and spread across thousands of miles. That meant prey animals had fewer safe havens. It also meant competition was fierce. Have you ever wondered why dinosaurs became so dominant? Pangaea is part of that answer. With open, connected landscapes, species that adapted well could conquer vast territories. And once they gained an advantage, it was hard for anything else to compete. Still, the story of Pangaea isn't just about survival. It's about mystery. Imagine standing on one of its coasts. Before you stretches the Panthalassa, the universal sea. This wasn't just an ocean. It was the ocean, covering most of Earth, wrapping around the entire supercontinent like a vast, endless moat. No matter where you stood on Pangaea, if you walked far enough in one direction, eventually you'd reach this gigantic body of water. Its waves beat endlessly against cliffs and sandy shores. Its storms roared with unmatched fury. And within its depths lived creatures just as strange and powerful as those on land. Giant marine reptiles, armored fish, and swarms of ammonites with coiled shells glinting beneath the waves. Standing there, watching that ocean stretch out to the horizon, you'd probably ask yourself, how did all this come to be? How could the Earth have pulled all its land together into one colossal block? And perhaps more importantly, why didn't it last? Because here lies the quiet tension that would define Pangaea's fate. For all its size and power, this world was fragile. A single landmass meant a single climate system. When drought hit, it spread across entire regions. When forests burned, the smoke could darken skies for thousands of miles. And when the Earth shifted beneath, entire ecosystems could be reshaped in the blink of an eye. In many ways, Pangaea was both a paradise and a ticking time bomb. Let's step back again and think like explorers. Imagine traveling across it. 1 month, you trek through endless desert. The next, you stumble into a swamp buzzing with dragonflies the size of hawks. Another month, you're crossing volcanic highlands, smoke rising in distant columns, the air thick with ash. Pangaea wasn't uniform. It was vast and varied, a patchwork of extremes stitched together. And yet, no matter where you went, you were still on the same continent. One Earth, one land. What does that do to life? What does it do to evolution when the whole world is connected? It creates uniformity, but it also limits diversity. Species spread far and wide, but ecosystems lack isolation. It's only when barriers emerge, oceans, mountains, distance, that life branches out, becoming wildly different in different places. And that moment, as we'll see, comes later when Pangaea breaks apart. But for now, this is the world before borders. A land unified by tectonic power, ruled by the first wave of dinosaurs, and shaped by the endless interplay of desert, forest, swamp, and sea. A world that feels at once eternal and temporary, because deep below, the Earth is preparing for its next act. So the question is, if everything was united, why did it all begin to fracture? And what chain of events would that set in motion for the history of life, including us? The answer lies not in what you can see above, but in what's hidden below. And that's where the next chapter of our journey begins. Chapter 2. Forged in fire, the Earth you stand on feels solid. It feels permanent, unshakable. But that's an illusion. Beneath your feet lies a restless world, one in constant motion, where molten rock churns and plates of solid crust drift like rafts on a hidden ocean of fire. And it was out of this fiery, shifting underworld that Pangaea was born. To understand the rise of the greatest supercontinent in Earth's history, you have to go back hundreds of millions of years before its peak. Long before dinosaurs, long before familiar life even dreamed of walking the land, the continents were scattered fragments adrift across the globe. Africa, South America, North America, Eurasia, India, Australia, Antarctica, all the pieces we recognize today were once independent wanderers. Over unimaginable stretches of time, the forces of plate tectonics pulled them together. Picture this. Enormous slabs of Earth's crust, moving at the pace your fingernails grow. That might sound slow, almost laughably slow. But over millions of years, that pace is enough to reshape the planet. Mountains rise. Oceans vanish. Continents crash together with a force beyond imagination. When two plates meet, the results are cataclysmic. Volcanoes erupt, earthquakes tear the land apart, and rock itself bends and folds into new landscapes. Is how Pangaea was forged through fire and fury. One of the most dramatic collisions happened when the landmasses that would one day become North America and Africa slammed together. Imagine the impact. Entire stretches of seabed buckling, the crust crumpling upward into mountain ranges. The very rocks beneath the eastern United States still bear the scars of this event. The Appalachians, old, worn down now by time, were once towering mountains as high and jagged as the Himalayas. Their roots were born in the birth pangs of Pangaea, but it wasn't just mountains. Volcanoes seared the landscape, filling the skies with ash. Lava poured in rivers across valleys, cooling into black plains of basalt. The air itself would have been thick, toxic, and suffocating at times. Standing in those early days of Pangaea's birth, you'd see a world in chaos, a world literally on fire. And yet, amid the destruction, there was creation, volcanic ash-enriched soils. Fresh coastlines opened as oceans closed, creating new environments for life. The merging of landmasses brought once separated species into contact, sparking waves of competition and adaptation. This is the paradox of Earth's fury. From violence comes renewal. But let's linger here, in this fiery forge. Imagine being present during one of these collisions. You're standing at the edge of a shallow sea, the sky hazy with volcanic smoke. Suddenly, the ground trembles beneath you, a low growl from the Earth's core. The water surges, sloshing onto the shore as if panicked. In the distance, mountains rise like giants waking from slumber, pushing higher and higher as two continents lock together. Trees topple. Rivers change course. It's not just a geological event. It's the planet rewriting itself in real time. And as violent as it was, this process was slow by human standards. No one earthquake or eruption created Pangaea. It was the accumulation of countless shifts, countless upheavals, layered over tens of millions of years. The supercontinent didn't just appear. It was hammered into existence, like a sword being forged in the heart of a furnace. But why did the continents come together at all? The answer lies in convection currents deep in the mantle, the molten rock beneath the crust. Heat rising from Earth's core set the mantle in motion, pushing plates toward or away from each other. It's a dance as old as the planet itself. Continents drift apart, then reunite. Supercontinents have formed before Pangaea, and they will form again. Rodinia, Gondwana, Laurasia, these were earlier chapters in a repeating cycle scientists call the supercontinent cycle. Pangaea was simply the latest, and perhaps the most dramatic, expression of this cosmic rhythm. But in its time, Pangaea was unique. It brought almost all of Earth's land into one colossal union. A true one world. And that unity came at a cost. When landmasses collided, ecosystems were crushed. Shallow seas, once teeming with marine life, vanished as continents sealed them shut. Species that had evolved in isolation suddenly found themselves face to face with unfamiliar competitors. Extinction followed in the wake of collision, but so did opportunity. New environments, new challenges, these became the testing grounds for the survivors. It's no coincidence that in the wake of Pangaea's formation, we begin to see the rise of creatures that would dominate the Mesozoic, the dinosaurs. The stage was set by fire. Let's zoom in on one such stage, the region that would one day become modern-day Morocco. During Pangaea's forging, this land was a crucible of geological chaos. As Africa and Europe pushed together, volcanic activity reshaped the landscape. Lava plains hardened, mountains rose, and ancient river systems were forced to find new paths. Fossils found here reveal a strange blend of species creatures from once separated continents, thrown together by tectonic fate. Crocodile-like archosaurs prowled the swamps. Early dinosaurs darted among conifers. The chaos of geology became the spark of biodiversity. Or take another example, the collision zone that created the Urals, where Europe met Siberia. This was a land of earthquakes and fire, but also of innovation in life. Strange synapsids, mammal-like reptiles flourished here, creatures that look uncannily like experiments halfway between reptile and mammal. They were part of the evolutionary trial and error that the chaos of Pangaea made possible. Now step back. Think about the sheer scale of this process. Continents colliding, oceans closing, mountains rising, volcanoes painting the skies red. All of it happening not in one lifetime, not even in 1,000,000 years, but over spans so long that human minds can barely grasp them. And yet, every inch of ground you walk on today was shaped by those very forces. Even the continents we know now, North and South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, still carry the fingerprints of Pangaea's creation. If you look at a world map, the puzzle pieces still fit. The coastlines of South America and Africa match almost perfectly because they were once pressed tightly together. The Appalachian Mountains in North America line up with the Caledonian Mountains in Scotland and Scandinavia because they were carved from the same ancient collision. The echoes of that fiery forging are all around us. And here's where the story twists. Because as soon as Pangaea was formed, its destruction began. The same forces that welded continents together also began to pull them apart. Beneath the supercontinent, heat built up. The mantle churned. Pressure mounted. Slowly, cracks began to appear, tiny at first, then widening into rifts. Volcanic fissures split the land, and magma welled up from below. The supercontinent's own creation planted the seeds of its undoing. But that's the paradox of Earth. Creation and destruction are inseparable. Pangaea was forged in fire, and fire would eventually tear it apart. So when you look back at this time, you can almost feel the tension. On the surface, one vast unified world. Beneath, the planet's core was restless, whispering promises of change. Pangaea stood as both triumph and tragedy, a moment of wholeness destined to fracture, and that fracture is where our story will take us next. In Chapter 3, Endless Horizons Close. Your eyes for a moment and picture the world's largest desert. Most people would imagine the Sahara a sea of sand stretching across North Africa, vast, unforgiving, and seemingly endless. But 200 million years ago, the Sahara would have looked small in comparison to the desert at the heart of Pangaea. This was not just a desert. It was the desert, an expanse so massive that it swallowed continents, a place where the land itself seemed to stretch into infinity. This is what makes Pangaea so breathtaking to imagine. Its geography wasn't simply familiar landscapes stitched together. It was a world reshaped into extremes. With all the continents fused, climates and ecosystems didn't exist in neat little pockets the way they do now. Instead, they sprawled out on a scale that almost defies belief. At the very core of Pangaea lay what scientists call the Central Pangaean Desert. It was a landlocked wasteland, larger than any desert the Earth has ever seen before or since. Imagine standing there, no horizon in sight, just an unbroken ocean of sand. Days scorched with blistering heat. Nights plunged into freezing cold. Rain almost never came. Any creature that dared wander too far into this barren furnace was met with silence, starvation, and death. And yet, even here, life clung to existence. Fossil footprints suggest that some small reptiles crossed this burning heartland, darting between oases that appeared like rare jewels in the sand. A few hardy plants may have rooted themselves along dry riverbeds. But for the most part, this desert was a dead zone, the scar of unity carved across the belly of Pangaea. But don't mistake Pangaea for a wasteland. Because along the edges of that desert, where rivers flowed and rain still fell, life exploded in dazzling abundance. The forests here were unlike anything we know today. Forget rolling fields of grass, they didn't exist yet. Picture instead towering cycads, their palm-like fronds unfurling toward the sun. Giant horsetails lined swampy ground, growing taller than a man. Ferns spread across valleys like carpets of green. It was a primeval garden, alien and ancient, yet teeming with life. Walk through one of these forests, and you'd find yourself in a world alive with strange sounds. The rustling of leaves as early dinosaurs dashed between trunks. The splash of amphibians sliding into murky ponds. The droning hum of insects, some with wingspans as wide as your hand. And above it all, the distant crack of thunder. Because here at the edges of the desert, storms could unleash their fury with violent force. But the most awe-inspiring part of Pangaea's geography wasn't just its deserts or its forests, it was its sheer size. Imagine walking across an entire continent and never reaching an ocean. Today, you can drive across North America in a week or Europe in a few days. But on Pangaea, you could trek for months, even years, without ever finding the sea. The horizon stretched endlessly, broken only by distant mountains or the haze of volcanic smoke. Mountains, too, told Pangaea's story. The Appalachians in North America, the Atlas in Africa, the mountains of Scotland, all of these ranges were once part of the same chain, born from the violent collisions that welded Pangaea together. Back then, they weren't the rounded, worn-down hills we see today. They were jagged giants, rising like teeth from the earth. Snow may have capped their peaks, while lower slopes were cloaked in strange forests. To stand at their base would be to feel dwarfed by the planet's raw power dot, and then there were the coastlines. Pangaea was surrounded by a single, unimaginably vast ocean, Panthalassa. Picture a shoreline stretching for thousands of miles, waves pounding cliffs of black basalt or crashing onto sandy plains. There were no neat Atlantic or Pacific divisions, just one universal sea, covering nearly 70% of Earth. Its storms would have been monstrous, hurricanes swirling with fury across its surface, unchallenged by mountain ranges or scattered continents. Along Pangaea's coasts, shallow seas offered havens of life. Coral reefs, different from those we know today, thrived in warm waters. Ammonites, with their spiraled shells, drifted like cosmic jewels beneath the waves. Giant marine reptiles hunted the depths, their sleek bodies slicing through the water with terrifying grace. To walk along those shores was to stand at the meeting point of two extremes, the endless land behind you and the endless ocean before you. And yet, perhaps the most fascinating thing about Pangaea's geography wasn't its deserts, mountains, or seas. It was the way all of these features connected. Today, ecosystems are separated by oceans and continents. A rainforest in South America doesn't touch the deserts of Africa. The tundra of Siberia doesn't brush against the forests of North America. But in Pangaea they did. All the environments of Earth, deserts, forests, swamps, coasts flowed into each other across one continuous landmass. What does that mean for life? It meant species could spread far more easily than they can today. A dinosaur that evolved in what is now South America could migrate into Asia without ever crossing an ocean. A predator in Africa could roam into Europe, chasing prey across thousands of miles. There were no locked-off continents, no isolated cradles of evolution. Everything was connected. And while that gave some creatures incredible opportunities, it also meant diversity was limited. With no barriers, fewer species could branch out into unique forms. But imagine how it must have felt to live there if you could. Picture standing on a cliff at sunset, gazing out across the land. The desert glows red beneath the fading light. In the distance, a river winds through a green valley, its waters glittering like a ribbon of silver. Beyond that, Mountains loom against the horizon, their peaks shrouded in cloud. And far, far away, the great ocean waits, its waves rolling endlessly. It is a world of scale, a world of extremes, a world without borders. Yet for all its majesty, Pangaea was unstable. Its vast deserts were a symptom of its size. With so much land, rainfall struggled to reach the interior, leaving the center parched and lifeless. Its forests, while lush, were vulnerable to fire. Its coastlines, though rich with life, were exposed to the violence of Panthaloss's storms. This geography was both magnificent and precarious, and underneath it all, the earth was restless. The very forces that had forged Pangaea, the grinding of plates, the churning of mantle, were still at work, reshaping landscapes even as they stabilized. Mountains were rising, even as rivers carved valleys through them. Volcanic plains cooled, even as new fissures cracked the land. It was a geography in motion, a planet in constant flux. That's the paradox of Pangaea's horizons. They seemed endless, eternal. But in reality, they were temporary, fragile, fleeting. Because deep below, the Earth was already preparing for the next chapter. And that chapter would begin with cracks in the ground, rumbles beneath the surface, and fire seeping once more into the skies. Chapter 4. Creatures of the Unified Land. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A land where the horizon never seems to end. A single unbroken continent stretching farther than the eye can see. Now picture it alive. Across the plains, herds of massive reptiles lumber slowly toward distant rivers. In the forests, smaller, swift-footed creatures dart between tree trunks, always alert for danger. Along the coasts, enormous amphibians haul their weighty bodies from the shallows, while pterosaurs cast shadows overhead, gliding silently across the sky. This was Pangaea, not just a landmass, but a stage where life itself experimented in forms both familiar and utterly alien. The creatures that roamed here were pioneers, shaping the blueprint for the animal kingdoms that would dominate Earth for millions of years to come. Some would rise, others would vanish, but all were bound together by this single, unified land. And here's the twist. Life on Pangaea wasn't just about survival. It was about adaptation in extremes. From endless deserts with scorching heat to lush coastal wetlands buzzing with strange predators, the animals of Pangaea were forced to evolve in ways that would shock us today. Let's step into this world. First, the giants. Before the dinosaurs became the rulers of Earth, there were other contenders, the synapsids. Imagine creatures that looked part reptile, part mammal, their skulls carrying the hints of the warm-blooded animals to come. Some, like Dimetrodon, sported massive sails on their backs, perhaps to regulate body temperature or to intimidate rivals. They were predators unlike anything else alive at the time, their serrated teeth designed for tearing flesh with brutal efficiency. But Dimetrodon wasn't a dinosaur. In fact, the age of dinosaurs had barely begun. Instead, Pangaea in its early days was crawling with a strange mixture. Crocodile-like archosaurs, early amphibians clinging to the edges of rivers, and insect life larger than you'd ever want to meet in person. This was nature's trial run, the casting call before dinosaurs claimed the spotlight. And when dinosaurs did arrive, the world shifted. The first dinosaurs weren't the towering giants we often picture. They were small, swift, and cunning. Coelophysis, for example, was a slender predator no taller than a human child, but it hunted in packs. Imagine a swarm of them darting across the open plains, their sharp claws and teeth flashing in coordinated attacks. Alone, one Coelophysis was dangerous. Together, they were unstoppable. Meanwhile, herbivores like Plateosaurus began to appear. These plant-eaters weren't graceful. They were enormous, heavy-bodied creatures with long necks to reach higher vegetation. Herds of plesiosaurs moving across the Pangaean landscape must have been a sight of sheer scale, leaving trails of flattened plants and dust behind them. And yet, their size was both a blessing and a curse. Bigger meant safer from smaller predators, but also slower and vulnerable when cornered. But life wasn't limited to land. The skies of Pangaea belonged to the pterosaurs, some with wingspans wider than a car. They were the first vertebrates to conquer flight, and they ruled the air with silent grace. Imagine standing on the shore of an ancient lake, looking up, and seeing dark shapes silhouetted against the sun, wings stretched wide, gliding endlessly on the thermals. They were the ancestors of nothing we know today, a branch of life that would rise and fall alongside dinosaurs, but never truly become birds. And then, there was the water. The seas and rivers that lapped against Pangaea's shores hid their own monsters. Early marine reptiles, precursors to the mighty ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs of later ages, prowled the shallows. In freshwater rivers, amphibians the size of crocodiles lurked in silence, waiting for unsuspecting prey to step too close. The water was no safer than the land, and survival meant staying alert every moment of every day. But what makes this story of life on Pangaea even more extraordinary is how interconnected it all was. Because the land was unified, animals could spread farther than ever before. A predator that evolved in what is now South America could wander north into what would one day become Africa, or east toward Asia. Species didn't just belong to one place, they belonged to Pangaea. And that global spread meant competition was fierce. Those who adapted thrived. Those who didn't disappeared into extinction. Let's pause here. Ask yourself this: if you had been alive during Pangaea's prime, what would have scared you more? The endless pack hunters like Coelophysis, the looming shadows of pterosaurs overhead, or the silent killers waiting beneath the water's surface? It's almost impossible for us to truly imagine living in a world where every single ecosystem, was crammed into one massive continent. Yet this is where the story of dinosaurs truly begins. Without Pangaea, dinosaurs may never have had the chance to spread so widely, so quickly, or dominate the Earth the way they did. But remember, Pangaea wouldn't last forever. The creatures of this unified land had no idea that beneath their feet, forces were already stirring. Forces that would rip their world apart, change their habitats forever, and divide their descendants into new paths of evolution. The land was alive with creatures. But soon, the land itself would turn against them. Chapter 5. When seas divided the land at first glance, Pangaea looked like an endless fortress of stone and soil. A single unbroken landmass so vast it seemed indestructible. But even here, water was carving its story, silently, patiently, and with a power that rivaled fire and stone. You see, Pangaea wasn't just land. It was also wrapped and shaped by oceans so massive, they made today's seas feel almost small. To the west stretched Panthalassa, an ocean so huge it covered nearly 3/4 of Earth. Imagine standing on the shores of Pangaea, gazing westward and seeing nothing but water, not for miles, not for hundreds of miles, but for thousands. No continent on the horizon, just endless rolling blue. But water wasn't only outside Pangaea. It was inside too. Inland seas and rift basins began to creep into the heart of the supercontinent, slicing into its edges, flooding its lowlands. These were the first cracks in the illusion of unity, and they would eventually become the oceans we know today. Now, think about what this meant for life. At first, these seas were like highways for species. Reptiles and amphibians clustered along their shores, drinking, hunting, breeding. Fish swam up rivers that poured into inland lakes, bringing with them food for predators waiting on the banks. The edges of these waters were some of the most alive, most competitive ecosystems anywhere on Earth. But over time, the seas did something far more profound. They started dividing the land. Picture this: a population of animals spread across the whole of Pangaea. Then, slowly, a widening sea cuts through their habitat, separating one group from another. They can't cross back. Over thousands, then millions of years, those separated populations evolve differently. New species are born. The ocean is no longer just water, it's a wall. And that wall changed everything. One of the most infamous came near the end of the Triassic period. Around 200 million years ago, the Earth convulsed in one of its greatest volcanic episodes. Gigantic fissures split the crust, spewing out millions of cubic kilometers of basalt. To imagine it, picture a river of molten rock, not a few meters wide, but hundreds of kilometers across. It wasn't just a volcano. It was a world of flame, the skies darkened with ash and gas. Carbon dioxide flooded the atmosphere. For creatures living through it, life became unbearable. Imagine dinosaurs gasping as the air turned thick with heat and poison, plants wilting as acid rain fell from skies turned black, oceans warming until coral reefs withered. This wasn't just destruction, it was a turning point in history, because from these fires came one of the greatest extinction events the planet has ever seen, the Triassic-Jurassic. Extinction wiped out nearly 80% of life. Reptiles, amphibians, entire lineages of strange creatures, all gone. But as in every great catastrophe, survival breeds new beginnings. And from the ashes of that fiery purge rose the age of the dinosaurs. The true rulers of the Jurassic world thought the fire beneath Pangaea didn't just kill. It reshaped destiny. But what caused these massive eruptions? Scientists believe the answer lies in the restless engine beneath the crust mantle plumes. Think of them like gigantic blowtorches rising from deep within the earth, burning through the plates above. Today, one fuels the Hawaiian Islands, slowly building them volcano by volcano. But in Pangaea's time, mantle plumes were stronger, more violent, and unleashed all at once beneath a landmass so huge that its weight pressed heavily on the crust. The heat had nowhere to go but upward, and when it broke free, the result was apocalyptic. Entire regions of Pangaea were buried under layers of volcanic rock, sometimes up to 2 kilometers thick. The Central Atlantic magmatic province stretching across what is now Africa, South America, North America, and Europe stands as one of the largest volcanic events in Earth's history. It marked the beginning of the end for Pangaea's unity. But there's another side to this story. Because fire, as destructive as it is, also gives life. Volcanic eruptions release not only death, but also nutrients and minerals. Basalt, once cooled, becomes some of the richest soil on Earth. The same eruptions that scorched forests eventually nourished new ones. New ecosystems sprouted in the wake of destruction. Life, ever resilient, took advantage of the chaos. Dinosaurs that survived found open niches, new hunting grounds, new opportunities. Predators grew larger, herbivores more diverse. In many ways, fire paved the way for the golden age of the dinosaurs. And still, the Earth SMOLD, ERED, to live in Pangaea was to live on a continent that was never still. Earthquakes rattled the ground as tectonic plates strained against one another. Lava fountains lit the night sky, painting it in crimson and gold. Imagine herds of early sauropods, massive long-necked, dinosaurs grazing under a horizon where fire plumes rose like pillars into the heavens. Imagine predators stalking prey across landscapes streaked with cooling lava, the ground beneath them still hot to the touch. For early humans, such scenes would have felt like hell. But for the dinosaurs, it was simply the world they knew. A world where creation and destruction walked hand in hand. Even today, the scars remain. Basalt cliffs in Morocco, rift valleys in eastern North America, volcanic plateaus in Brazil, all are remnants of the great fires of Pangaea. To a geologist, they are monuments not of destruction, but of rebirth. Silent proof that the Earth itself is alive, always shifting, always changing. And this fire from beneath would not stop. It was only the beginning. Because as lava forced its way through cracks, it weakened the very foundation of Pangaea. The continent that once seemed eternal was beginning to break. Oceans would pour into those wounds, continents would drift apart, and a new world would rise. But before the final breakup, The creatures of Pangaea would endure ages of fire, storms, and change shaped by a planet that was never truly still. Because beneath every forest, every desert, every river of that ancient world, one truth always burned: the earth is alive, and its fire can never be contained. Chapter 9. Life torn apart. How ecosystems were split for more than 100 million years. Pangaea had been the stage for life's greatest drama. From its endless deserts to its lush forests, creatures had evolved side by side, predators and prey shaping one another in a constant dance of survival. It was a world of unity, where animals could roam freely from one edge of the continent to the other. But as the fire from beneath reshaped the land, that unity began to fracture, and when Pangaea finally broke, life itself was torn apart. At first, the changes must have seemed subtle. The cracks were small, the rifts narrow. A river here became deeper, a valley there became wider. Herds of herbivorous creatures that once could migrate across vast plains suddenly found their paths blocked by widening lakes and canyons. Carnivores that had depended on predictable prey migrations discovered that their hunting grounds were shrinking. The balance of life, so finely tuned, began to falter, but soon the changes were no longer subtle. Oceans began to pour into the cracks, creating new coastlines where once there had been grasslands and deserts. Vast regions were cut off, becoming islands in a slowly expanding sea. And with isolation came transformation. Imagine a world where a single family of dinosaurs once roamed together. As the land broke apart, one group found themselves stranded on what would become Africa, another on South America, and another still in North America. For a while, they were the same. But separated by distance, climate, and shifting environments, evolution began to shape them differently. The once unified creatures of Pangaea became strangers. This is one of the great engines of evolution: isolation. When populations are split apart, their genes take different paths. Over millions of years, small changes, longer necks, sharper teeth, better camouflage add up until new species emerge. The breakup of Pangaea didn't just divide the land. It created entirely new worlds of life. The evidence lies in the fossils. Paleontologists have found near-identical species in Africa and South America, proof that before the continents drifted apart, they had once lived side by side. But after the split, those creatures diverged. What was once a single lineage became two, then three, then countless branches on the tree of life. But make no mistake, the process was brutal. Ecosystems don't simply adjust overnight. When oceans swallowed grasslands, entire herds vanished. When climates shifted from wet to dry, lush forests collapsed into deserts, and the creatures that depended on them disappeared. Some species adapted, but many perished. Imagine massive sauropods, once roaming across wide, green plains, suddenly trapped in shrinking territories with fewer trees to feed on. Imagine predators forced into new hunting strategies, clashing with rivals they had never encountered before. It was survival of the fittest on a scale the Earth had rarely seen. And yet out of this chaos came opportunity. Take, for example, the small feathered dinosaurs of early Pangaea. As landmasses drifted and climates shifted, some populations were pushed into dense forests, where flight became an advantage. Others remained on open plains, where speed was key. Over time, these different pressures molded them into new forms, some that would eventually give rise to modern birds. Without the breakup of Pangaea, that diversity might never have emerged. But there was a cost. Because ecosystems are not just about species, they are about relationships. Predator and prey, plant and pollinator, scavenger and hunter. When the land split, those relationships were torn apart. A predator that once relied on a particular prey might find itself without a food source. A plant that depended on a certain insect for pollination might vanish when that insect was stranded. Across the sea, life wasn't just adapting, it was grieving. Entire webs of existence unraveled, only to be rewoven in new, unexpected ways. One of the most striking examples comes from the ancient amphibians. Before the breakup, giant crocodile-like amphibians lurked in rivers and swamps across Pangaea. But as climates changed and new oceans formed, their habitats dried or vanished. Many were wiped out completely, clearing the way for crocodiles and dinosaurs to dominate. The old rulers were gone, and new ones took their place. This tearing apart of life echoes even today. Look at Madagascar, an island isolated for nearly 90 million years. Its creatures, lemurs, strange reptiles, and plants found nowhere else, are living proof of what happens when ecosystems are split apart. Multiply that by the scale of Pangaea, and you can imagine the evolutionary explosion that followed. But for the creatures living through it, it was no explosion. It was loss. Picture a herd of Plateosaurus, early plant-eating dinosaurs, migrating across what is now Europe. They reach a rift valley where once they had crossed easily. Now it has widened into a canyon, deep and impossible to pass. The herd is trapped. On one side, they continue their lives. On the other, they vanish, their bloodline forever severed from their kin. From that moment on, two separate worlds exist, never to meet again. Or imagine predators like the coelophysis, once spread across wide regions. Now with shifting lands and changing climates, their habitats shrink. Some adapt and survive, but others die out. In their place, new predators evolve faster, larger, more specialized. The stage is being set for the rise of giants like Allosaurus and later, Tyrannosaurus. The breakup of Pangaea was not a single event, but a slow tearing that lasted millions of years. With every centimeter, the continents drifted apart, ecosystems were reshaped. Forests became isolated patches. Deserts expanded. New oceans divided once unified worlds. It was a time of endings, but also of beginnings, and perhaps the most profound effect was on the very direction of evolution. Without Pangaea's breakup, the world might never have seen the diversity of life we know today. The dinosaurs that once ruled as a unified empire now split into countless branches, adapted to different lands, climates, and challenges. Some grew enormous, dominating open plains. Others shrank, finding niches in forests. Still others took to the skies, life torn apart. Became life reborn, but this rebirth came with scars. Because once the land was broken, there was no going back. Pangaea was gone forever. Its creatures would never again roam a unified Earth. The age of continents had begun, and with it, the long journey toward the world we know today. Still, as we look back at those ancient fossils, at bones separated by entire oceans yet clearly kin, we can see the echoes of what was lost and the astonishing resilience of what survived. In the end, the breakup of Pangaea was both tragedy and triumph. It shattered ecosystems, ended lineages, and tore families of creatures apart. But it also sparked new life, new worlds, and new possibilities. Without it, the story of Earth, the story of us, might never have happened. Because sometimes, to create something new, the old must be broken. And when Pangaea broke, life itself was forever changed. Chapter 10. The Atlantic awakens. For millions of years, the cracks across Pangaea had been widening. At first they were little more than scars, rift valleys filled with swamps and lakes, split rivers carving out new paths. But slowly, relentlessly, the Earth's crust stretched until the unthinkable happened. Water began to pour in, and from that moment, a new ocean was born. It's strange to imagine, isn't it? To us, the Atlantic Ocean feels eternal. An endless horizon of blue, a vast expanse separating continents, shaping weather, and carrying ships. But there was a time when it didn't exist at all. Where we now see rolling waves, there was once solid ground, a bridge connecting what would become Africa, Europe, and the Americas. The Atlantic Ocean is not ancient in the way the Pacific is. It's young, geologically speaking, only about 180 million years old. And its birth was violent. Picture it, a rift valley stretching thousands of miles, torn open by Earth's restless mantle below. Magma surged upward, hardening into new crust as it met the air. But this was no ordinary lava flow. This was seafloor being forged, black rock laid down in ridges that would one day become the spine of the Atlantic. The mid-Atlantic ridge dotted first. Narrow channels of water seeped in. Lakes grew wider, filling with salt water as the first trickles from the ancient Panthalassic Ocean reached inland. Then, storms pushed tides deeper. Slowly, valleys that once held forests and dinosaurs became drowned under shallow seas. Entire ecosystems disappeared beneath the rising waters, replaced by a new world of marine life. Imagine being there, standing on the edge of the land as the horizon shifts. You might have seen trees topple into the waves, the skeletons of drowned forests visible just below the surface. Pterosaurs wheeled overhead, confused by the sudden appearance of endless water where their hunting grounds once stood. For land creatures, the ocean was a barrier. For marine life, it was an opportunity. And what an opportunity it was. The Atlantic was a cradle of change. Shallow, sunlit waters teemed with nutrients, sparking explosions of life. Early marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs swam into the new ocean, their sleek bodies cutting through waters that had only just formed. Fish shoals darted in dazzling numbers, while ammonites, those spiral-shelled, cephalopods flourished in these newborn seas. But the Atlantic wasn't just about life. It was about separation. The widening waters created a divide between worlds. On one side lay Africa and Europe. On the other, the Americas. Species that once mingled now found themselves isolated, never to meet again. The Atlantic wasn't just a body of water, it was a wall, reshaping evolution on either shore. This is why today, the fossils of dinosaurs in North America differ so dramatically from those in Africa, despite their common ancestry. When the Atlantic split them apart, their stories diverged forever. The Earth itself left a trail of clues to this great awakening. Along the coastlines of Africa and South America, rocks bear matching fingerprints, evidence that they were once one. Fossilized plants and animals appear on both continents, identical up until the moment of separation. Even the outlines of the coasts, like puzzle pieces waiting to be rejoined, whisper of the Atlantic's violent birth. And at the center of it all, the mid-Atlantic ridge continues its work. Even now, it pushes the continents apart by a few centimeters each year. The Atlantic is still growing, still reshaping our planet, an ocean that's very much alive. But let's return to that first moment of awakening. Imagine a dawn millions of years ago. The air is thick with volcanic smoke. Across the rift, molten rock glows, painting the sky in crimson streaks. Then, from the east, a surge of seawater rushes in, boiling as it meets the heat, hissing against the new stone. The land trembles, creatures scatter, and before your eyes, the earth changes forever. That was the Atlantic's first breath. And though no human witnessed it, the echoes of that moment live on in every wave that crashes on our shores today. Every tide, every current, every storm that sweeps across the ocean is part of that story, a story that began when Pangaea broke, and the Atlantic awakened. The rise of the Atlantic Ocean was more than geology. It was destiny. It shaped climates, redirected evolution, and set the stage for the modern world. Without it, there would be no Americas as we know them, no Europe or Africa as separate continents. The Atlantic was the dividing line that gave birth to the world map we recognize today. But the awakening of the Atlantic was only part of the tale. Because while the waters rose and spread, life itself was being forced into new shapes. Entire lineages were broken, ecosystems scattered. And as the continents drifted further, the cost of this separation became painfully clear. Because where there is creation, there's also loss. And in the story of Pangaea, the next chapter is one of struggle, extinction, and the tearing apart of life itself. Chapter 11, Dinosaurs Divided. For millions of years, dinosaurs lived in a world of astonishing unity. From the smallest scavengers to the towering giants, they roamed a supercontinent so vast it stretched from pole to pole. Pangaea was their kingdom, a single interconnected stage where life played out without barriers. Herds could wander endlessly. Predators could pursue prey across entire continents. There was nothing to stop them, but Earth has never been still. Beneath their feet, forces beyond comprehension were at work. And as Pangaea cracked apart, as oceans rose between the fragments of the supercontinent, that unity was shattered forever. The dinosaurs were divided, the first signs of division. At first, the changes must have seemed subtle. Small rifts in the earth, valleys deepening, lakes forming where plains once lay. To the dinosaurs, these may have seemed like temporary obstacles and inconvenience, nothing more. But what they could not see was the scale of the transformation. These cracks weren't small blemishes. They were the beginnings of oceans. Picture it. A group of coelophysis, nimble predators no bigger than a dog, sprinting across the forest floor of what is now North America. They follow prey tracks toward a familiar route, but when they arrive, they find a lake stretching wide before them, far larger than anything they've seen before. There's no way across. They circle the shore, confused, before retreating. That moment marks the beginning of a divide. On one side, their descendants will one day evolve into new specialized hunters. On the other, their lineage will take a different path entirely. This is how worlds split, not in a single cataclysm, but in countless small, unseen moments. Oceans as barriers. As the Atlantic Ocean slowly carved itself wider, dinosaurs found themselves trapped on separate continents. What had once been one vast open stage became many smaller ones. South America drifted away from Africa. North America edged further apart from Europe. Asia split into its own isolated landmass. Each of these fragments became a world unto itself, with its own climates, challenges, and opportunities. For dinosaurs, the implications were enormous. Herds of herbivores that once crossed thousands of miles to feed were cut off from familiar routes. Predators that relied on vast territories were forced into smaller, fragmented lands, and with each separation came a profound shift. Evolution accelerated, diverging paths of evolution. Here's the beauty of nature, it adapts. Isolation forced dinosaurs into new directions. In South America, cut off from the rest of the world, sauropods thrived. With no competition from certain predators, they grew larger and larger until they became the colossal titanosaurs, the heaviest land animals to ever live. Argentinosaurus, for example, stretched over 100 feet long and weighed as much as 10 elephants combined. Across the ocean in North America, isolation pushed predators into dominance. The tyrannosaurs evolved here, culminating in Tyrannosaurus rex, a predator so powerful it would become the stuff of legend. But T-Rex never set foot in Africa or South America. Its reign was confined to its corner of the broken world. Africa, meanwhile, developed something stranger. Spinosaurus, an apex predator with a crocodile-like snout and a towering sail on its back, dominated rivers and swamps. Unlike the land-stalking T-Rex, Spinosaurus may have hunted fish, swimming through waterways like a reptilian leviathan. And in Asia, another path unfolded. Here, raptors thrived, small feathered hunters, cunning and agile. From these feathered theropods, eventually, birds would take flight. One supercontinent had become a dozen evolutionary laboratories. The dinosaurs, once united, became a kaleidoscope of diversity. Emotional weight of division. But let's pause and really think about what this meant. Imagine being a young sauropod, following its herd across a familiar route. The smell of the sea drifts on the wind, a strange salty scent you don't recognize. Ahead, where once there was grassland, waves crash against the shore. The herd stops. Some cry out in confusion. The migration is over. You will never cross again. Across that water, unseen, your cousins live their lives as before. But from this moment forward, your worlds will never touch. Over generations, your kind will grow taller, heavier, adapted to this side of the sea. Their kind on the other side will face different pressures. Eventually, you will no longer even be the same species. What must it have felt like to be cut off from the world? We can't truly know. But the fossil record whispers the outcome. Fossils as witnesses. Paleontologists have uncovered identical fossils on both sides of the Atlantic, proof that dinosaurs once walked a connected land. In both South America and Africa, scientists have found the bones of the same early species of plant-eating reptiles, locked in stone. But after the Atlantic spread, that unity disappeared. Later fossils show divergence. The animals on either side of the ocean grew more and more different. Evolution had taken separate roads. Even the very coastlines hold clues. The matching shapes of South America and Africa are not a coincidence. They're scars of separation. If you push them back together in your mind, you can see the ghost of the world dinosaurs once knew. Broken webs of life. Division didn't just change the dinosaurs themselves. It shattered the web of life they depended on. Predators and prey relationships unraveled. Plants that had once spread seeds across the continent were now limited to smaller ranges. Insects that pollinated those plants were cut off, leaving some species to vanish. Even the great cycles of migration collapsed, as oceans blocked the ancient roots of herds. This was more than a change. It was grief written into the earth. Entire ecosystems dissolved, only to be rebuilt in new forms. The what-if question. Here's a thought. What if Pangaea had never split? Would dinosaurs have continued as a global empire, spreading evenly across the world? Would a single predator, like a super Tyrannosaurus, have reigned across all lands? Would birds have evolved differently, or perhaps not at all? It's impossible to know. But one thing is clear. The division of Pangaea gave rise to the incredible variety we now see in the fossil record. Without it, the dinosaurs might have remained uniform, less diverse, less spectacular. The very thing that tore them apart is what made them unforgettable. A world forever changed by the time the Atlantic Ocean had fully spread. The dinosaurs were no longer one people, but many. They were divided by seas, shaped by different climates, sculpted by isolation into creatures more varied than ever before. Yet their story remained interconnected in another way. Each group, whether in South America, Africa, Asia, or North America, continued to push the limits of what life could become. And though they would never again share a single stage, together they created the most extraordinary chapter in the history of life on Earth. The dinosaurs were divided, but in that division, they flourished. Chapter 12. A changing planet. The Earth has never been a silent witness. Beneath its crust, it has always pulsed with restless energy, shifting, cracking, building, and destroying. In the age of the dinosaurs, this restlessness reached a fever pitch. The breakup of Pangaea did not simply redraw coastlines, it rewrote the very script of life on Earth. For the dinosaurs, the world was no longer predictable. It was a stage where every backdrop, deserts, forests, oceans, even the sky was in constant motion. And survival meant adapting to a planet that never stopped changing. Planet torn between fire and water. Picture it. One morning, a herd of massive sauropods wakes to an alien sound in the distance. It isn't the call of predators. It isn't even the howl of wind. It's the roar of fire, erupting from deep beneath the ground. Mountains split open. Lava surges out, glowing rivers carving through forests. The air fills with ash so thick that day turns to twilight. Temperatures plummet as the sun disappears behind a gray veil. For years, the land freezes in a volcanic winter. Plants die. Herbivores starve. Predators follow. Entire lineages vanish. But then slowly the smoke clears. The ash enriches the soil, and life returns in waves. Green erupts from blackened ground. New plants rise, and with them, new species of dinosaurs. The planet wasn't just destroying. It was renewing. Storms without end, as if fire wasn't enough. Water reshaped the land. The growing Atlantic Ocean began to breathe life into the skies. Storms spiraled upward, fueled by warmth from the newborn sea. Rains hammered the land for weeks at a time, turning dry plains into lakes. Imagine a family of stegosaurs, once accustomed to arid scrubland, suddenly wading chest-deep through a swamp that hadn't existed a generation earlier. Their world wasn't just changing, it was reinventing itself, and not all survived. Floodwaters swept away nesting grounds. Hurricanes leveled forests. Some dinosaurs found new territory to claim. Others were erased in the chaos, from uniform to fragmented. When Pangaea was whole, its climate was brutally uniform. A single giant desert in the middle, fringed by strips of green along the coasts. But as the landmass fractured, climates diversified. Suddenly, ecosystems didn't just vary, they multiplied. Jungles exploded in what would become South America, buzzing with life. New shallow seas flooded Europe, turning it into a patchwork of islands. Cold winds swept across the poles, where dinosaurs began to grow feathers, not for flight, but for warmth. The world was no longer one great system. It was many smaller ones, each with its own challenges, its own opportunities, its own evolutionary playground. Dinosaurs in the crossfire. The dinosaurs were caught in this planetary revolution. In the east, titanosaurs adapted to lush new forests, their massive necks sweeping through canopies of leaves that had never existed before. In the north, smaller, faster species like feathered raptors took advantage of volatile environments, darting between habitats with cunning intelligence. But for others, the changes were too much. Some species, perfectly suited to the stable deserts of central Pangaea, could not cope when those deserts shrank. They vanished, lost to time. The message was clear. In this new world, survival belonged not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. A world of extremes. One of the most striking effects of Earth's transformation was its growing extremes. In some regions, heat soared. Tropical forests became steam-filled greenhouses, home to insects as big as birds and dinosaurs sweating under dense canopies. In other regions, cold settled in. Polar dinosaurs endured half a year of darkness, learning to forage in snow under the faint glow of the aurora. Life was stretched to its limits. Some dinosaurs evolved insulating feathers. Others developed efficient lungs to cope with thin, cold air. Some learned to migrate, following the seasons like nomads across a fractured land. The Earth was dividing, and dinosaurs were dividing with it. The breath of the planet through it all. The Earth seemed to breathe. Oceans spilled over coasts, then withdrew. Forests surged forward, then retreated. Ice crept outward, then melted back. The planet moved in rhythms too vast for a single dinosaur to notice. But across millions of years, these rhythms reshaped everything. For us, looking back, it's clear, the breakup of Pangaea set the stage for the incredible diversity of life that followed. Without these shifts, the dinosaurs might never have evolved into such astonishing forms. Echoes we still feel, and here's the part that gives you chills. We are still living in that change. The Atlantic Ocean, once a narrow crack, is still widening today. The continents are still drifting apart. Volcanoes still tear open the Earth's skin. Storms still rage across seas that were once desert. The world we know, our continents, our climates, even the placement of our oceans, exists only because Pangaea broke apart. And just as the dinosaurs were forced to adapt, so are we. Lessons from a shattered world. The story of a changing planet isn't just prehistoric drama, it's a lesson. The dinosaurs thrived not because their world was stable, but because they evolved in a world that was anything but. They remind us that resilience comes not from resisting change, but from bending with it, adapting to it, and finding opportunity within it. Pangaea's breakup didn't just change the dinosaurs' fate. It set the blueprint for life on Earth today, and it shows us something humbling. Our planet is never still. It is always becoming something new. Chapter 13. Echoes in today's Earth. To most of us, continents seem timeless. They're the outlines we memorized as kids, the backdrop of maps and globes, the boundaries of our modern world. But the truth is more astonishing. The continents we walk upon are not fixed, not eternal. They are fragments, drifting pieces of an ancient whole. Though Pangaea vanished nearly 200 million years ago, its story has not been buried. It still pulses through the Earth itself, etched into coastlines, mountains, and rocks that remember a time when the world was one. If you know where to look, the echoes of Pangaea are everywhere. The puzzle pieces of the Earth. Pull up a map. Now trace Africa's west coast with your finger, and then slide it along South America's east coast. Do you see it? The curves match as if they were once joined. Because they were. The Atlantic Ocean, stretching wide and endless today, was once nothing more than a thin crack in the Earth. Over millions of years, it yawned open, pulling Africa and South America apart, but never erasing their shared edge. And the puzzle doesn't stop there. Greenland once nestled against Europe. India was fused to Antarctica before it tore northward at breakneck speed, slamming into Asia and raising the Himalayas. Australia drifted away from its Antarctic roots like a castaway raft. Every coastline carries the memory of the day the pieces split. Mountains as monuments to collision. Look closer, and you'll see mountains that tell the story of Pangaea's birth and death. The Appalachians in eastern North America look nothing like the rugged Alps of Europe at first glance. Yet geologically, they are sisters, torn apart by the Atlantic's widening gulf. Once, they were a single range, formed when continents slammed together to create Pangaea's backbone. The Atlas Mountains of Morocco? Their roots connect to these same collisions, scars left behind when massive plates pressed together. The Caledonian Ranges of Scotland and Scandinavia share this same origin, a chain now separated by entire oceans. When you stand on these mountains, you are standing on ancient fault lines, monuments to the raw power that once crushed continents into one. Rocks that refuse to forget rocks. 2. Carry memory. Coal seams in North America are identical to those in Europe. Fossil beds in Brazil line up with those in Western Africa, filled with the same ancient plants and reptiles. Mesosaurus, a small freshwater reptile, lived on both sides of the Atlantic long before the ocean existed. Its fossils are found in Brazil and Namibia, as if mocking the idea of separate continents. And in Antarctica, now a frozen desert, fossils of tropical ferns lie buried under ice, proof that it once basked near the equator, joined with India and Africa in Pangaea's embrace. The Earth does not forget. Its rocks are storytellers, whispering the truth of a unified world. Oceans that keep growing. The breakup of Pangaea wasn't a one-time event. It is still happening. The Atlantic Ocean, born as a slender rift, widens every year. If you were to measure the ocean floor, you'd find ridges, underwater mountains where molten rock pushes outward, creating new seafloor and slowly shoving continents farther apart. The distance between New York and London grows by centimeters each year. At the same time, the Pacific Ocean is shrinking, its edges swallowed back into the Earth at subduction zones. Entire coastlines tremble with earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis as the planet recycles its crust. The Earth is not still. It never has been. It never will be. Landscape shaped by an ancient past everywhere you look. The Earth's landscapes carry echoes of Pangaea, the rift valleys of Africa. The Great Rift, stretching thousands of miles, are the first signs of a new split, a scar that may one day birth another ocean. The deserts of the American Southwest are remnants of ancient inland seas that appeared as Pangaea fractured. The cliffs of Iceland rise directly over the mid-Atlantic ridge, where continents are still pulling apart beneath your feet. Even the resources we depend on, coal, oil, and natural gas, owe their existence to the ecosystems Pangaea nurtured and destroyed. The world's energy reserves are, in a way, the final breath of that vanished supercontinent, a living legacy. So what does this mean for us? It means that every mountain you've hiked, every beach you've stood on, every earthquake or volcanic eruption, it's all part of the same story. We are living inside the echo of Pangaea. The continents may seem steady, but they are restless. In 200 million years, our map will be as unrecognizable to future life as Pangaea is to us. Perhaps Africa will collide with Europe, closing the Mediterranean. Perhaps the Americas will drift toward Asia, forming a new supercontinent. The Earth is already at work, quietly reshaping the stage on which our story unfolds. The echo we can feel, and here's the most humbling thought of all. Pangaea's echoes aren't only in stone and shape. They are in us. Humans evolved on a planet sculpted by its breakup. The climates, the ecosystems, the diversity of environments that shaped mammals, and eventually us, were all born from Pangaea's demise. Without that ancient fracture, there might be no forests as we know them, no great rivers, perhaps no humans at all. Every step we take is on the skin of a world forever transformed by a supercontinent that disappeared long before we existed. Pangaea is gone, but its voice is still here, speaking through every mountain, every fossil, every wave crashing against a shore that was once joined to another. The supercontinent may have vanished, but its echoes surround us, reminders that our planet is alive, restless, and forever becoming something new. Chapter 14. What if Pangaea never broke? Imagine holding a globe in your hands. Instead of today's patchwork of continents, North America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia scattered across endless oceans, there's only one colossal piece. A supercontinent. Vast, unbroken, dominating nearly half the Earth's surface. This was Pangaea. But now, let's imagine something far stranger. What if Pangaea never split apart? What if Earth's continents had remained fused, locked together forever? It's not just a simple different map scenario. This alternate Earth would be unrecognizable, its climate, its creatures, even its history. Perhaps even humanity itself. Let's walk into that parallel world. A land without end. Picture standing at the edge of this eternal Pangaea. The coastline stretches so far, it disappears into the horizon. Behind you lies not another sea or a neighboring continent, but a landmass so immense that you could walk for thousands of miles without ever reaching an ocean again. But here's the catch. Not all of that land would be survivable. On today's Earth, continents are broken up, letting oceans carry moisture deep inland. On an eternal Pangaea, the opposite would happen. The further you go inland, the drier and hotter it gets. Clouds can't carry rain thousands of miles from the sea. The result? A gigantic, lifeless desert stretching across the heart of the continent. Larger than any desert we know today. The Sahara would look like a sandbox compared to it. Sand dunes would roll for hundreds of miles. Winds would whip across barren plains. Temperatures would swing from blistering heat in the day to freezing cold at night. This would not be a land for thriving civilizations. It would be a dead zone at the center of the world. Life, human or otherwise, would cling to the coasts. The coastal cradle civilization would rise on the fringes. Rivers and estuaries along the coasts would be the lifelines. Imagine narrow strips of fertile land, green ribbons along the vast edges of Pangaea. That's where agriculture would bloom, where cities might rise. But unlike our world, where great civilizations sprouted independently, Egypt on the Nile, the Maya in Central America, China along the Yellow River, an eternal Pangaea would compress all of humanity into fewer cradles, fewer sparks, fewer chances for cultural explosions. Would we still see thousands of languages? Thousands of religions? Thousands of inventions? Probably not. The diversity of human experience might be far smaller. Instead of a mosaic of different worlds, there might only be a handful of dominant cultures. Would that make us more unified or dangerously stagnant? Oceans without borders now. Let's think about the oceans. In our reality, the Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, and Pacific divide the world into regions. On an eternal Pangea, there's only one, Panthalassa. A single ocean wrapping around the supercontinent like a blue infinity. Sounds simple, but it changes everything. Crossing Panthalassa would be an epic, near impossible challenge. No stepping stone islands like Hawaii, no archipelagos, no Atlantic crossings with pit stops. For ancient humans, this ocean would feel like a cosmic barrier, endless and unforgiving. Cultures on opposite edges of Pangea might never meet. Imagine entire civilizations developing on the far side of the supercontinent, unaware that others even exist. Generations, centuries, millennia could pass without a single sail reaching across that endless blue. Would there even be a Columbus moment? Would humanity ever have an age of discovery? Or would the ocean remain a mystery forever, a blue void where ships vanish and never return? Evolution on repeat, but let's rewind. What about life before us? Here's where it gets fascinating. On our Earth, the breakup of Pangea drove evolution. When continents split, species were cut off from each other, forced to adapt in isolation. That's why South America produced giant terror birds, while Australia gave us kangaroos, while Madagascar became home to lemurs. But on eternal Pangea, that never happens. With no geographic isolation, species would be everywhere. Fewer unique animals, fewer strange experiments by evolution. Biodiversity would shrink. Dinosaurs would have been uniform across the landmass. Mammals, after their rise, would be similar across thousands of miles. There'd be fewer oddities, fewer evolutionary surprises. Would humans even evolve at all? Isolation is what creates new species. Without it, maybe no apes, maybe no hominins, maybe intelligence never arises. Or if it does, maybe it happens once in one place and spreads across the entire supercontinent with no competition. Imagine an Earth with only one intelligent species and nothing else to challenge it. Would that species thrive? Or grow stagnant, never push to adapt, never push to innovate? Civilizations of the rim assume humanity does appear. How would we live? The center of Pangea is dead. The interior deserts and volcanic plains cut us off. So we hug the coasts. But here's the thing. The coastline of Pangea would be unimaginably long. Hundreds of thousands of miles of potential settlements, cities, harbors. Entire civilizations stretched like pearls on a necklace around the edge of the world. Instead of continents, trading with each other, humanity would form rings of civilizations, clusters along the coasts, separated by deserts too vast to cross. The Silk Road? It would be a silk rim, hugging the edge of Pangea. Wars would not be fought over distant continents, but over fertile slices of coast. Rivers flowing into the ocean would be lifelines worth empires. Power would not belong to land armies, but to those who controlled the sea. A delayed future now. Let's fast forward into a speculative future. What about technology? Progress. On Earth as we know it, ideas jumped continents. Printing in China made its way to Europe. Potatoes from South America fed the old world. Mathematics traveled from the Middle East to Asia to Europe. In eternal Pangea, those exchanges would be slower. No new world to discover, no sudden influx of crops or animals or knowledge. Civilizations might repeat the same mistakes, locked in their own loops, without the spark of contact. The Renaissance? Delayed. The Industrial Revolution? Perhaps never. And here's a haunting thought. In a world without diversity, without exchange, maybe humanity never reaches space. Maybe we never look beyond Pangea. Earth itself would change. But even if humanity survived, Pangea itself might not. Supercontinents are inherently unstable. Their vast weight disrupts the Earth's mantle. Heat builds beneath. Volcanoes erupt on a scale far beyond anything we know. Pangaea itself began to break apart with volcanic firestorms that poisoned the air and triggered mass extinctions. If Pangaea had stayed intact, those eruptions might have been even worse. Lava flows stretching for thousands of miles. Skies darken for decades. Oceans acidifying. An eternal Pangaea might not be eternal at all. It might be doomed to self-destruction, a landmass collapsing under its own weight. Humanity clinging to the edges might face endless cataclysms, supervolcanoes, megastorms, droughts, mass die-offs. Survival itself would be a constant struggle, a mirror of our own world. And yet imagine if we lived on that earth today. We'd look at our single continent, at our endless deserts, at our few scattered civilizations, and wonder, what if it had broken apart? Would there be more life? More cultures? More opportunities? Would the earth be more alive? It's almost ironic. On our earth, the breakup of Pangaea looks violent, destructive, chaotic. But in truth, it gave us everything. The diversity of life, the richness of culture, the spread of ideas, the spark of progress. Without the breaking, we might not even be here to ask these questions. The gift of fracture. And so, maybe the final lesson is this: what looks like destruction is often creation in disguise. Pangaea's breakup was not the end of a world, it was the birth of ours. Without separation, there is no diversity. Without diversity, there is no innovation. Without innovation, there is no us. So the next time you look at a map at Africa across from South America, at India drifting into Asia, at Australia isolated in the Pacific, see it not as brokenness, but as design. The Earth's continents broke apart to give us possibility, to give us wonder, to give us life as we know it. And in the grand story of the Earth, that might be the most beautiful twist of all. Chapter 15. Pangaea's legacy. For hundreds of millions of years, the Earth has been in motion. Not the spinning of its axis, not the orbit around the sun, but something far deeper, something beneath our very feet. The continents, which to us seem fixed, eternal, unchanging, are in truth restless travelers. They slide across the mantle like ships on a vast, invisible ocean of rock. They drift, they collide, they tear apart. And the greatest chapter in this slow dance of stone was the rise and fall of Pangaea. But Pangaea's story did not end when its landmass fractured. Its legacy is still written into every continent, every coastline, every mountain range. Its memory lingers in the fossils beneath our feet and even in the lives we live today. To understand Pangaea is to understand the Earth itself, not just what it was, but what it is and what it will become. The ghosts in the landscape. Look at a world map. Trace your finger along the coast of South America, then drift eastward to Africa. The fit is uncanny. Brazil's bulge presses neatly into the Gulf of Guinea, like two puzzle pieces pulled apart. For centuries, sailors, explorers, and philosophers noticed this, long before the science of plate tectonics was understood. It was Pangaea calling to us, whispering its story through the shape of the land. And it's not just the coastlines. The Appalachians in North America are geological cousins of the Caledonian Mountains in Scotland and Scandinavia. Once, they were a single chain, part of a colossal mountain range that stretched across Pangaea's heart. Today, they sit half a world apart, their peaks weathered but still carrying the same scars of their birth. When you hike through the Smoky Mountains or the Scottish Highlands, you are walking across the same ancient spine of stone, split by time but united in origin. Even the deserts tell the tale. The Sahara's vast sand seas and the deserts of South America were once connected. Their layers of sandstone carry the same mineral fingerprints. To a geologist, these rocks are more than rocks. They are messages from Pangaea, time capsules of a unified Earth, life's grand separation. But Pangaea's breakup wasn't just about landscapes. It reshaped life itself. Before the split, creatures roamed freely across one giant landmass. Early dinosaurs, mammal ancestors, giant amphibians, they shared the same forests and swamps. Predators and prey locked in a balance that stretched from pole to pole. When the supercontinent fractured, ecosystems were torn apart. Populations were stranded, isolated by new oceans. Some species thrived in their new worlds. Others perished. Evolution, always opportunistic, began to play its grand experiment. The isolation of continents became a factory for diversity. This is why we see marsupials thriving in Australia but almost nowhere else. Why South America, before the land bridge to North America formed, developed its own bizarre collection of giant sloths, terror birds, and armadillos. Why Africa's animals evolved in a different direction than Asia's. Pangaea's breakup seeded the incredible variety of life we marvel at today. Even we humans owe our existence to this legacy. The environments that shaped our earliest ancestors in Africa, the Rift Valley, the savannas, were products of tectonic forces unleashed long after Pangaea shattered. Without the continents drifting, without climates shifting, the chain of events leading to us might never have unfolded. Oceans born of fire and stone. Atlantic Ocean is perhaps Pangaea's greatest monument. Today, it seems eternal, a vast blue void separating the old world from the new. But to Earth's history, it is young, a mere teenager compared to the ancient Pacific. It was born in fire. As Pangaea stretched and cracked, magma welled up from the mantle, splitting the crust and carving rifts that widened into seas. Over millions of years, those seas deepened, filling with salt water, growing into the ocean we know. Each wave that crashes on a beach in Portugal or Brazil is part of this ongoing legacy. Even now, the Atlantic is still widening, by about the rate your fingernails grow each year. Slowly, relentlessly, the continents drift farther apart. This is Pangaea's heartbeat, still pulsing beneath us. The cycle of creation and destruction never ends. One day, in the unimaginable future, another supercontinent will form. Pangaea was not the first. It will not be the last. Pangea in us, but Pangaea's story is not only written in stone and sea. It is written in us. Our myths, our imagination, our search for unity all reflect the memory of a world that was once whole. We speak of a motherland, of a homeland, as if all people came from one place. In truth, we did. Humanity's earliest ancestors walked the valleys of Africa, land that was once the heart of Pangaea. Every human alive today carries within them the echo of that ancient unity. There's a poetic irony here. Pangaea broke apart, scattering life, dividing worlds. Yet humanity born from those scattered lands has spent its history trying to reconnect. We built ships to cross the oceans Pangaea's breakup created. We fly planes over the divides. We send messages across satellites, shrinking the world back into one connected place. In a way, we are rebuilding Pangaea through technology, through culture, through the invisible webs of connection that tie us together. The future of continents. So what comes next? The story of Pangaea is not finished. The continents continue to move. Africa's inching northward, closing the Mediterranean. Australia is drifting closer to Asia. The Pacific Ocean is slowly shrinking. Scientists predict that in 200 to 300 million years, a new supercontinent will form. Some call it Pangaea Proxima. Others imagine Novo Pangaea, Aurica, or Amasia, different visions of where the drifting continents will collide. Will the Atlantic close again, uniting the Americas with Europe and Africa? Will the Pacific vanish, bringing Asia and the Americas together? The details are uncertain, but one thing is not: the continents will not stay as they are. The map of Earth is temporary, a snapshot in a film still rolling. And when that new supercontinent rises, new mountains will tower. New oceans will spread. New species will evolve, shaped by the land as we were. Pangaea's legacy is the cycle itself, the eternal reminder that Earth is alive. One world, One home as we stand here, in our brief human moment, Pangaea's story offers us perspective. The continents seem divided. Nations seem at odds. But in the deepest sense, we have always been one. The earth beneath us was once whole, and it will be whole again. Pangaea teaches us humility. Our lifetimes are fleeting compared to the movements of continents. Yet, in that short span, we have the chance to understand, to appreciate, to connect. The lesson is clear. Just as the continents were once joined, so too are we connected by history, by biology, by the fragile planet we share. So when you gaze at a world map, don't just see borders, don't just see separation. See the outlines of a puzzle that was once complete. See the echoes of mountains, deserts, and seas that tell a story far older than humanity. See Pangaea's legacy still alive in every stone, every wave, every breath of wind. Because in the end, Pangaea's greatest legacy is not just that the earth was once united. It's that it still is. The oceans divide us, but they also connect us. The continents drift apart, but they remain pieces of the same world. And we, the tiny creatures who walk its surface, are the inheritors of that unity. The story of Pangaea is the story of Earth, and Earth is the story of us.